the NBA, you have to pretend that Bronny's an NBA player because otherwise you'll upset the king. And remember, he is a 6'2 guard that's a non-point guard. I've never seen that existing in the current NBA. And go back 20 years. He is 1 for 16 in the NBA from the floor, 0 for 7 on threes. He's not an NBA player. He was not a great high school player. He was a good high school player. He wasn't a good college player. He was a college player. And he's not an NBA player. And he may be a great kid. I'm sure he is. LeBron's a nice guy.
Every NBA locker room operates by a code you'll never see written down. It's not posted on a bulletin board or handed out in a playbook, but the moment you step inside, you can sense it. It hangs in the air. There are only 15 spots on a roster. That's it. 15 chairs in a league filled with millions who once dreamed about sitting in one. And for every player who makes it, there are countless others who were just as hungry, just as talented, who never got that phone call. Oh, those roster spots aren't just jobs. They represent years of trade-offs, holidays spent over video calls, birthdays missed, savings drained, tiny apartments, early morning flights to cities most fans couldn't find on a map, players battling in the G League, crammed into middle seats on commercial planes, while the superstars glide past on private jets. That's why the atmosphere inside those walls is different. It's serious. It's earned. Respect isn't handed out because of hype or potential. Oh, it's demanded through sacrifice. And if you're fortunate enough to have one of those 15 lockers, you'd better prove you deserve it.
James, he's 7 for 28 in 4 preseason games from the field. He's 2 for 13, I believe, from three-point range. He's got 8 assists and 8 turnovers. He's moving into year 2. This guy is not an NBA.
That's why Stephen A. Smith sees this differently than most of the people firing off takes online. He's not guessing. He's been embedded in this league for years, sitting courtside, having real conversations with general managers, assistant coaches, and veterans clawing for one final contract. He's witnessed what it actually costs to survive in the NBA. He's watched players grind through summer league just to earn a training camp invite, guys bouncing between two-way deals, splitting time between the G League and the end of the bench, players hanging onto 10-day contracts, living out of hotel rooms, suitcases never fully unpacked, constantly checking their phones for the call that might finally stick. From the outside, fans reduce it to just basketball. Inside the league, it's much bigger than that. It's someone's income, someone's identity. 40 years of work balanced on a single opportunity that can disappear overnight. And when a roster decision starts to feel more political than competitive, people inside the building pick up on it immediately. Players sense it, coaches sense it, executives sense it. The vibe doesn't blow up in one dramatic moment. It slowly shifts. Conversations get clipped, laughter sounds rehearsed, body language tightens during practice. The room gets heavier. That's the space the Los Angeles Lakers are navigating right now with Bronny James. On the surface, it looks like a storybook scenario. Draft night cameras flashing, a guaranteed deal, the purple and gold jersey, one of the most storied franchises in all of sports. But inside an NBA locker room, perception matters, and everyone is paying attention.
Just looked it up. G-League top scorers, points per game. I went through 50 and there's no Bronny James in there. He had 140-point game. Other games were 1. So now you do the math, and it's not going to be in the top 50. I don't even know who is this. Bryce McGowan, Elijah Harkles, Trey Alexander, DJ Davidson. Never heard of these kids. But they're dropping 30 a night in G League. Why is Bronny sitting on the bench?
A courtside view from the bench at Crypto.com Arena every single night. James across the back of the jersey isn't just a name, it's a brand. It draws cameras. It fuels segments. The narrative practically builds itself. It feels like something out of a movie script, but inside an NBA locker room. Hollywood doesn't mean much. Output does. Reliability does. Coaches have to trust that you can defend your matchup. Teammates have to trust that you won't fold when a playoff series tightens up. And the veterans who scratched and clawed for their place need to believe everyone beside them earned it the same way. That's where it gets tricky. Because being LeBron James's son doesn't lower the noise, it amplifies it. Every possession gets dissected, every missed jumper becomes a viral clip, every stretch of minutes turns into a television debate. The conversation stops being about development and starts being about optics. This isn't about questioning Bronny's effort or desire. No one doubts he's putting in the work, but the NBA doesn't reward effort alone. It rewards impact. You don't just ask for minutes. You make it impossible for a coach to sit you. You eliminate uncertainty, and that's why this feels larger than one first-year player. It feels like a measuring stick for the Lakers' identity, a challenge of how they weigh history against merit, a look at how much influence can coexist with a locker room built on competition and survival. That's also why the debate won't fade anytime soon, because in this league, reputation might open the door, but it's performance that decides whether you stay in the room.
0 for 5, looked terrified, nervous, and the Sixers, you can't fool players, went right after him. This continues to be an unserious.
This was never about draft night graphics, trending hashtags, or the name on the back of a jersey. It comes down to belief. When the Los Angeles Lakers were shorthanded, when Luka Doncic was sidelined, when Gabe Vincent couldn't go, when Austin Reeves was nursing injuries and the guard rotation thinned out. Those weren't empty possessions at the end of a blowout. Yeah, those were meaningful games with playoff positioning at stake, high leverage minutes, real consequences. That's when a coaching staff reveals what it truly thinks, and Bronny James's number wasn't called. Instead, JJ Redick made a decision that carried more weight than any post-game explanation ever could. He put Nick Smith Jr. into the starting lineup, not for optics, not for a feel-good headline, simply because, in that moment, he believed it gave the team the best chance to compete. In the NBA, that speaks volumes. Coaches don't shuffle rotations in critical stretches unless they trust you. They don't experiment when defensive assignments can swing a game. Minutes aren't participation trophies. When a young player climbs the depth chart during meaningful basketball, that's not social media chatter. That's the internal pecking order revealing itself. And everyone in that locker room notices. Players track who finishes games. They see who checks in when momentum shifts. They pay attention to who the coach locks eyes with in a timeout. There's an unspoken ranking system, and nobody inside that room is blind to it. Now consider the context. Nick Smith Jr., a guard who started his career with the Charlotte Hornets, dealt with inconsistency early on. Questions about defense, streaky shooting, no guarantee of long-term security, not exactly a headline-grabbing acquisition. The Lakers added him quietly on a two-way deal. No spotlight, no elaborate announcement. Just a depth move most fans scrolled past without a second thought. Yet when the pressure mounted, he was the choice. This wasn't preseason experimentation. This wasn't development time with a 20-point cushion. These were rotation minutes when every possession gets dissected in film sessions the next morning. JJ Redick didn't deliver a passionate speech about it. He demonstrated his stance through action, showing who he trusted to execute coverages, maintain spacing, and stay composed under bright lights. Inside a locker room, that kind of message spreads fast. Veterans pick up on it, assistants pick up on it, even the players glued to the end of the bench pick up on it. Because if a two-way guard can leapfrog you when the stakes rise, that says something, even if nobody says it out loud. This isn't about disrespect, it's about competition. The NBA isn't driven by storylines, it's driven by dependability. When rotations tighten, narratives fade. What remains is trust. And lately, the Lakers' decisions have been clearer than any carefully crafted interview response. This wasn't about Nick Smith Jr. being a hidden star waiting for a dramatic unveiling. It was about who the staff believes helps them win right now. That distinction is louder than any press conference answer. Later, when the Phoenix Suns stretched the lead and the result was essentially decided, Bronny finally checked in. Around 9 minutes left, low-stakes minutes. Watch, the outcome already leaning heavily one way, the competitive tension gone. That's not rotational faith, that's controlled exposure. And it's beginning to feel less like an isolated instance and more like a trend. Different opponent, similar pattern. If the game is tight, he watches. If it's competitive, he waits. If something meaningful hangs in the balance, he's not in the equation. That's not typically how teams handle a young player they're grooming as a foundational piece. Development usually involves living with mistakes, letting a rookie experience the speed, the pressure, the consequences. What's happening here feels more calculated, more cautious, almost protective. This extends beyond one tough matchup or an off shooting night. It's becoming a recurring storyline that's harder to frame differently. Bronny hasn't logged more than 10 meaningful NBA minutes since early November. For someone presented as part of the future, that's not the standard growth curve. Here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Locker rooms recognize trends. Players pay attention to who's on the floor when the score is tight and who only steps in once the pressure fades. That isn't bitterness, it's awareness, it's competition. If this were strictly about development, you'd expect to see small flashes of trust, maybe a defensive possession in a close game, a brief stint in a tense second quarter, a chance to feel real heat. Instead, the minutes have come in carefully managed stretches, safe windows, low stakes, controlled environments. After a while, that stops looking random. It starts looking intentional. It starts looking like a staff that isn't convinced he's ready. And in the NBA, not ready carries weight. Even when injuries piled up in the backcourt, even when the team could have used energy, ball pressure, sharper movement, Redick didn't look down the bench for Bronny James. And coaches in this league communicate clearly. Not through compliments, but through playing time. Minutes equal trust. Watching equals uncertainty. Not during one slump, not during two. Not even when the offense stalled and the defense needed a jolt. That kind of silence says plenty. NBA coaches stick with players they believe in. They'll accept missed shots. They'll live with an off night from deep. They'll even stomach a turnover if the reads are right. What they won't do is risk meaningful games on someone they're unsure about, especially a team still trying to define itself. Right now, the Los Angeles Lakers are making Bronny's place in the internal order clear without ever holding a press conference about it. No public criticism, no dramatic statements, just rotation choices that explain everything, which leads to the uncomfortable question people keep avoiding. Is that roster spot maximizing this team in the present? Across the league, there are guards clawing for any opportunity, players in the G League treating every possession like it might decide their future, guys who pick up full court, dive for loose balls, space the floor properly, cut hard, move the ball instantly. No narrative attached, just urgency. Those are the types playoff teams depend on when the calendar flips and every possession tightens. And here's the cold truth, those players don't get built-in patience. And they don't receive extended runway because of a last name. If they can't help immediately, they're replaced immediately. That's how this business works, which is why this situation feels heavier by the week. Every time Bronny records a quiet DNP, somewhere else a player is fighting to show he belongs. Every missed opportunity becomes part of a broader discussion about merit and timing. This isn't personal, it's professional. The NBA doesn't wait for anyone. Players are evaluated on impact, on film, on whether they shift a game. If they don't, the league moves on quickly. There's no emotional cushion. Right now, Bronny James hasn't consistently proven he can influence real high-leverage NBA minutes, the kind that swing outcomes. And that's when the subtle tension starts forming, not just online, inside the building, because players see everything. Who gets first crack at rotation minutes? Who's pulled after one mistake? Who's allowed to play through three? Each in that internal scoreboard never lies, and everyone in the room keeps track. Players keep score internally. They don't announce it, but they log everything. They notice who gets protected. They can tell when a chance feels earned versus when it feels arranged. During timeouts, they see which names the coach cycles through and which one he keeps passing over. Against the Phoenix Suns, when the Lakers were desperate for energy, for ball pressure, for pace, for anything to disrupt the flow, Redick searched for answers. He turned to Nick Smith Jr. He rolled out lineup combinations that looked clunky. He shifted more responsibility onto Austin Reeves. He tweaked rotations on the fly, trying to spark something. He tried almost every lever available, just not Bronny James. Bronny didn't enter until the game was already tilting out of reach. That's not random. That's not experimentation for curiosity's sake. That's hesitation, clear and unmistakable. And statistically, there isn't much cushioning the situation. Through 15 games, Bronny is averaging under 2 points per contest. Playmaking flashes have been sparse. Rebounding impact minimal. Defensively, it's hard to evaluate because the sample size is limited, and most of those opportunities have come in late game stretches when the result is largely settled. When benches are trading possessions, when the edge has dulled. To be fair, he's a rookie. Adjustment takes time. The NBA's pace, physicality, and spacing are a different world. No one is demanding superstardom overnight, but this isn't about superstardom. It's about whether he's compelling the coaching staff to trust him. So far, the rotation suggests he hasn't crossed that threshold. And in a league this unforgiving, not yet, can quickly morph into pressure. Because with every quiet outing, every brief appearance, games. Every skipped substitution, the same question grows louder. Is this truly development or is it presentation? The minutes he's receiving aren't the kind that test resolve. They're not fourth quarter possessions with playoff implications and a crowd on its feet. They're clock draining stretches, our end of bench shifts, lower intensity windows, and even within those softer pockets, he hasn't separated himself. That's the layer many avoid addressing. If he were dominating those stretches, hounding ball handlers full court, jumping passing lanes, drilling open threes decisively, this entire narrative would shift overnight. Coaches reward visible impact, veterans respect effort that shows up on film, energy spreads quickly in the NBA. One dynamic stint can earn another opportunity. Two strong sequences can crack a rotation, but that spark hasn't been consistent. There hasn't been a stretch where the tempo changed, because he was out there. No defensive surge that swung momentum, no offensive burst that forced an opposing timeout, no moment that made Redick reconsider the hierarchy. Instead, his presence has felt steady but subdued, neutral, quiet, no performance demanding extended minutes, no stretch that makes a coach say, "We need more of that." And in this league, neutrality often reads as a decision. Now zoom out. Bronny James holds one of only 15 guaranteed roster spots on a team not operating with patience as its primary strategy. The Los Angeles Lakers aren't rebuilding. They're not mapping out a 3-year developmental arc. Their timeline is immediate, aligned with LeBron James and a win now mandate. Every roster decision is supposed to reflect that urgency. The Lakers don't just need bodies. They need usable depth. And they need perimeter defenders who can switch in a playoff series without getting hunted every possession. They need guards who stay decisive when the game slows down and every trip becomes a half-court grind. They need role players who can walk into a hostile arena in May and execute like it's routine. And yet, one of their premium roster spots is tied to a player the staff has been reluctant to rely on when the score is tight. That's where the friction starts. True contenders don't reserve space for passengers. They stockpile contributors. When rotations shrink in April, there's no room for on-the-job training from the sideline. You either help win or you watch others do it. Right now, the playing time, nor absence of it, tells a story that no amount of spin can erase. In the NBA, minutes are truth, and this situation doesn't reflect a calm, long-range plan. It feels more like quiet pressure building behind the scenes. Front offices aren't sentimental. They don't operate off emotion, social media trends, or television debates. They work in silence. They study cap sheets until the numbers blur. They track tax lines. They forecast flexibility 2 summers out. Every contract is evaluated through a lens of value, risk, and timing. As February approaches and the trade deadline looms, every name on the roster becomes one of 2 things: an asset or a question mark. In a win-now window, there's no comfortable gray area. At this moment, Bronny James doesn't project as a steady developmental piece that aligns neatly with that urgency. He hasn't shown himself to be a plug-and-play option the staff feels secure using in meaningful stretches. Instead, he represents uncertainty, a variable the Lakers can't clearly define when games begin to carry playoff implications. This isn't personal, it's arithmetic. Strip away the emotion. Remove the historic father-son narrative that dominated headlines. Take out the marketing appeal, the jersey sales, the viral clips, the sentimental weight of legacy. What remains? Rotation patterns. And those patterns have been unmistakable. Bronny isn't in the Lakers' trusted circle right now. Not in closing time, not in high-leverage possessions, not when a single defensive stop can flip a result. The distribution of minutes has made that clear without anyone needing to state it publicly. Once that becomes the operating reality, justifying an active roster spot grows more complicated with each passing week, especially with LeBron James's future hovering over the franchise. Yes, LeBron opted in for another season, but that doesn't slow the clock, it speeds it up. At this stage of his career, every year carries heightened urgency. The timeline isn't expanding, it's tightening. Every postseason push inside that arena carries a quiet understanding. The window isn't guaranteed to stay open. You can sense it in the tightened rotations. You can see it in the rapid adjustments after a loss. You can feel it in how quickly role players get pulled after a mistake. The urgency isn't shouted in press conferences. It's controlled, strategic, but it's unmistakably present. When the goal is a championship, emotion doesn't get priority, production does. Versatility does. On reliable depth does. Front offices aren't asking whether a storyline feels meaningful. They're asking whether it gets them through 4 playoff rounds. And that question sharpens as the trade deadline nears. It grows heavier when defeats stack up. It echoes louder when flaws are exposed on national television. Because this league doesn't hand out rewards for compelling narratives, it rewards execution. Eventually, the LeBron James chapter in Los Angeles will close. And when it does, any protective layer surrounding Bronny James disappears with it. At that point, the evaluation becomes straightforward and unfiltered. Same expectations as everyone else. Same accountability. No cushion created by history, just output. While LeBron is still there, context exists. Legacy fills the room. There's a broader arc people can reference when questions arise. But once that era ends, the question simplifies to one line. Can you consistently help this team win? Up to now, the evidence hasn't provided a definitive yes. That doesn't mean Bronny can't evolve into a legitimate NBA piece. Development rarely moves in a straight line. Guards especially need real reps against actual defensive coverages with physical pressure adjusting in real time. Confidence isn't built in drills, it's built in meaningful minutes against real opponents. But growth requires trust, and at this stage that trust doesn't appear fully formed. He's occupying one of the hardest spaces for a young player, technically on the roster, yet not clearly cemented in the long-term blueprint. Suited up every night, but outside the core rotation. On the road with the team, but not the option when possessions tighten and momentum swings. That middle ground is tricky. It's where progress can stall, where uncertainty creeps in, not just from outside voices, but internally. Players know when their margin for error is thin. They sense when opportunities only come after the outcome is settled. And here's the difficult reality many avoid stating outright. There are players in the G League right now who would inject immediate defensive energy. Guards overseas chasing one more NBA shot who would treat each possession like a final exam. Veterans in free agency who understand exactly how to fill a role without demanding the spotlight. Defensive specialists who embrace shutting down their matchup for multiple trips in a row. Change of pace guards who alter tempo the second they step on the floor. Floor spacers who stay disciplined, execute their assignments, and never drift outside their responsibility. Those are the types contenders lean on when April basketball slows into half-court chess. When scouting reports are exhaustive. When switches are hunted relentlessly. When weaknesses are attacked possession after possession. At that stage, potential alone isn't enough to survive. Contenders last because they can depend on the pieces around their stars. Reliability is what carries teams through May and June. And if the Lakers truly intend to squeeze everything out of this championship window, every roster slot has to pass a simple test. Does this player help us win right now? When the legacy storyline fades into the background, that question becomes unavoidable. The NBA doesn't slow its pace so someone can grow into it comfortably. There are no soft landings here, no extended grace periods wrapped in good intentions. On a team chasing a title, you either contribute or you get replaced. That's the reality. There's no multi-year patience plan for role players on contenders. If you can't defend, space the floor, or execute when the pressure spikes, the front office will look for someone who can, and they'll do it quickly. At the moment, one of the Los Angeles Lakers' 15 standard roster spots belongs to a player the coaching staff hasn't leaned on in meaningful stretches. Not in closing minutes. Not in tight third quarters when a quick run can flip momentum. Not in the kind of possessions that mirror playoff intensity. In a win-now setting, that tension doesn't fade quietly. It builds with every important game. This isn't about feelings, it's about the business. The NBA is unforgiving because it has to be. There's elite talent all over the world and only so many seats available. 30 teams, 15 roster spots each, 450 jobs total. Every contract awarded means someone else is left outside the door. Every substitution pattern sends a message, inside the locker room and across the league. And right now, the message coming out of Los Angeles is straightforward. The Lakers don't trust Bronny James in high leverage situations. Not in tight fourth quarters. Not when defensive rotations break down. Not when late game offensive possessions demand spacing and composure. Until that shifts, the scrutiny won't disappear. It will intensify, because once a perception takes hold, only performance can change it. The questions aren't emotional, they're competitive. Is this roster optimized for a title push? Is the 15th spot delivering tangible value? Would that position be better served by a defensive guard who can survive switches in a 7-game series? A veteran who understands positioning and doesn't need the ball. An energy piece who alters tempo immediately immediately upon checking in. Championship teams operate on thin margins. One extra stop, one dependable rotation player who doesn't get hunted, one guard who stays steady under pressure. Those subtle advantages determine whether you're still playing in June or packing up in May. Right now, Bronny hasn't pushed himself into that trusted circle. And the NBA doesn't adjust its standards for development curves unless you're rebuilding. It doesn't pause for sentimental milestones. It doesn't bend around last names or storybook arcs. Once the game starts, everything reduces to impact. Who wins possessions? Who holds their ground when the floor shrinks? Who earns trust, trip after trip, until the coach can't justify taking them out? Those are the only metrics that matter. And at this stage, Bronny James is confronting the toughest lesson the league teaches. Opportunity isn't secured by proximity, it isn't sustained by headlines, it isn't guaranteed by potential, it's claimed through undeniable production. For now, he's watching those chances go elsewhere, watching Nick Smith Jr. receive opportunities, watching veterans close games, watching rotations tighten as the stakes rise, waiting on trust that hasn't fully materialized. In the NBA, that's a dangerous place to be. Yes, because while you're waiting, someone else is working to make that seat theirs for good.